On 27th of July 1909, the Waratah was seen doing exactly what a safe ship should do. She was upright. She was making speed. She exchanged signals with Clan MacIntyre at about 6 in the morning, off the South African coast, on the run from Durban to Cape Town. By 9:30, she had drawn ahead and gone over the horizon near the Mbash River. Then the record stops. 211 passengers and crew were aboard. No confirmed wreckage was recovered. No boat reached shore. No survivor testified. The last reliable evidence places the ship in motion, apparently under command, on a route she was built to sail. That is the contradiction. This is not a story about a ship becoming a legend. It is a story about a ship that may have exposed the limits of the system that declared her safe. The Waratah did not disappear from a forgotten corner of the ocean. She disappeared from a trafficked coast after speaking another ship, before the ship behind her entered the weather she was heading toward. The first question was simple. Was she only late? At first, people could imagine a disabled steamer drifting. That was not fantasy in 1909. 18 years earlier, the Waikato had lost propulsion near the Cape and drifted for months before discovery. Waratah was new, large, and provisioned. A broken shaft or steering failure could leave a ship alive, but unreachable for a time. In Cape Town, 29th of July was not yet a mystery. It was an arrival date. Agents expected a liner. Passengers had onward plans. Families had a timetable. A missing ship does not become a legend on the first day. First it becomes late, then late became wrong. Ships looked. Coastlines were watched. The search pushed beyond the immediate lane into the wider Southern Ocean. The Blue Anchor Line chartered Sabine for a long sweep. Australian money later helped fund Wakefield. The searches covered thousands of miles, and the result was not a dramatic clue. It was absence repeated at scale. No floating liner, no lifeboat, no verified wreckage. That absence is why the inquiry file matters more than the legend. When the sea gives no object back, the only wreck left to examine is the record that put the ship there. The inquiry asked a colder question. What kind of ship can look safe at 6 in the morning and still leave no wreckage by the next day? Waratah was a Blue Anchor Line passenger and cargo steamer, built in Glasgow by Barclay Curley and launched in 1908. She was large for the company, more than 9,000 gross tons, about 500 feet long, built for the trade between Britain, South Africa, and Australia. She was not a pure passenger liner. On the outward leg, she carried emigrants and passengers. On the homeward leg, she carried people, wool, grain, skins, foodstuffs, metal concentrates, and the kind of mixed cargo that changes a vessel's character with every port. The ship on the builder's plan is one thing. The ship leaving Durban, loaded from Australian manifests and trim for the Cape, is another. Her sister ship, Geelong, was the comparison that would not go away. Geelong was smaller, older, familiar. Waratah was meant to be an improved version of a known type. Captain Joshua Edward Ilbery had commanded Geelong before he commanded Waratah. When he wrote after the maiden voyage, the comparison had weight. Here the case should have become straightforward. A new ship behaved oddly. The captain had experience with her sister ship. The owners and builders exchanged letters after the first voyage. The inquiry had something to read, but the file did not give one clean warning. It gave a fight over what counted as a warning. The managers later told the inquiry that no special report had been made about Waratah's behavior at sea. The court did not find that easy to accept. A new ship for a major route was being used as the basis for another vessel's specification. Silence about her stability would have been strange. Then the letters appeared. The builders produced correspondence showing that the owners had complained after the first voyage. The owners explained the letters as pressure in a commercial dispute over delay and demurrage. They said the strong language was bluff. Bluff is a useful word in an inquiry room. It turns an operational warning into a negotiating tactic. It lets a dangerous sentence become a business sentence. But a passenger ship does not know when a letter is bluff. A ship only knows how she sits in water, how she returns from a roll, and how her cargo has been stowed. The fatal assumption was that Waratah's tender behavior could be managed by ordinary loading, ordinary seamanship, and ordinary experience. Tender is a technical word, but the physical idea is simple. A ship rolls. A safe ship rolls back. A tender ship may come back more slowly than expected. That pause matters. For a passenger, the pause can feel like discomfort. A floor is no longer level. Water in a bath lies at an angle. A chair moves. For a sailor, the pause is a question about time. What happens if the next heavy sea arrives before the ship has properly returned? Tender does not mean doomed. It does not prove unseaworthy. It means the margin between ordinary roll and dangerous roll has to be understood precisely. For Waratah, that margin was the whole case. The court's own summary used two truths that sit uneasily together. On the calculations available, the ship had sufficient stability when she left Durban. On the evidence of her career, she had shown what the court called undoubted tenderness. Those are not the same statement. One belongs to the paper ship: metacentric height, righting lever, range of stability, cargo figures, expert arithmetic. The other belongs to the working ship: lists, rolling, slow recovery, passengers noticing the angle, officers deciding whether the motion was normal enough to continue. Claude Sawyer became the witness the newspapers liked, because he left the ship at Durban and survived. His dreams made easy copy, so easy that they still pull attention away from the useful evidence. The useful part of Sawyer's evidence is not the dream. It is that he said the vessel listed and rolled in a way that worried him before the disappearance was known. Other witnesses gave similar practical observations without the folklore frame. A carpenter's mate who had served in the Navy remembered the ship rolling heavily in the Australian Bight. Engineer Mason described the ship heeling after Melbourne and failing to recover herself properly. The ship's surgeon corroborated the concern. Then the case turned again. Other witnesses contradicted them. Port officers said she left ports upright. The tug master at Durban saw no list. The master and chief officer of Clan MacIntyre saw her steady when they spoke her on 27 July. The experts calculated that, as laden, she met the stability they expected. This is where the case becomes forensic rather than dramatic. The evidence does not give us a bad ship and good witnesses on one side, with a safe ship and lying witnesses on the other. It gives us a ship that could be upright in harbor, acceptable on paper, and still tender enough at sea for experienced people to remember the motion. The timeline narrows the problem. Waratah left Durban on the evening of 26 July 1909, bound for Cape Town. She was due on 29th July. The next morning, Clan MacIntyre sighted her. The two ships exchanged the ordinary questions by lamp: name, destination, weather. Waratah was making better speed. She overtook, drew away, and disappeared ahead. That is the last confirmed point. Put the route on the map. Durban behind her, Cape Town ahead. Clan MacIntyre following on the same general coastwise passage. Imbash, then called Bashi, near the last reliable visual line. After that, every mark is weaker. Reports by Harlow, Guelph, bodies seen or not seen, wreckage that could not be verified. Later sightings that arrived after the public already knew a ship was missing. What we know is narrow. We know Waratah left Durban with 201 people aboard. We know Clan MacIntyre spoke her on 27th July and saw no list. We know Clan MacIntyre later met heavy weather on the same coast. We know no confirmed debris, boat, body, or wreck was found. We know the inquiry could not determine the exact form of the catastrophe. What we do not know is larger. We do not know whether Waratah capsized from a roll, was overwhelmed by a steep sea, suffered a structural or cargo event, or met some compound failure that left no witness. We do not know the exact position of the sinking. We do not know whether the tender behavior remembered by passengers was a cause, a contributing condition, or only a feature that made people suspicious after the loss. The inquiry inclined toward a sudden capsize in the gale of 28th July. The court reached that view because Waratah was last seen heading toward the weather, because Clan MacIntyre later experienced the gale, because a disabled Waratah should probably have been seen by the ships searching and passing nearby, and because no wreckage was recovered after extensive search. On paper, that is careful. It is also incomplete. The court could say the ship was lost in the gale. It could say the precise manner could not be determined. It could say the calculations showed sufficient stability as laden. It could also say that the ship's tenderness had produced much adverse comment. The problem is that the court could not turn tenderness into a clean verdict without doing more than explaining one casualty. It would have had to say that a modern passenger cargo ship built by a reputable yard, surveyed under current rules, accepted into service by an established line, and compared constantly with her sister ship, had entered trade with a dangerous margin that the system itself had permitted. That is the institutional part of the case. It is not abstract once the route is on the map. It means a family waiting in Cape Town was relying not only on Captain Ilbrey, not only on the weather, and not only on the cargo plan. They were relying on a chain of signatures and calculations made before the ship ever reached Durban. The court came close to the edge of that admission. It suggested that expert committees might be needed to establish minimum stability requirements for different types of vessel. That suggestion is quiet, but it is not small. Courts do not call for better minimum stability rules because nothing in the case disturbed them. So the verdict held two ideas in the same hand. Waratah was sufficiently stable as laden. Waratah was also tender enough to make stability the central argument after she disappeared. The theories that came later tried to fill the gap. A coal bunker explosion was proposed. The Harlow report became part of that argument, with its smoke, lights, and possible flashes. But the inquiry found reasons to doubt that reading. The reported location and timing were troublesome, and another officer on Harlow thought some of what had been seen might have been a bushfire on shore. Guelph's partial signal, the last three letters TAH, had the same problem. It looked useful because it resembled the end of Waratah's name. But if that vessel was really Waratah, the timing forced awkward route and speed assumptions. The cleaner the story became, the less clean the navigation looked. There were also reports of bodies and objects in the water. Insizwa's master saw shapes near Bashi that looked suspicious to him, but the sea was too heavy to lower a boat. Tottenham officers reported possible bodies farther south, and the master who returned to inspect the area thought the objects were more likely dead sunfish or whale offal from the Durban whaling station. Those details are grim, but they are not proof. A shape underwater is not a body because a missing ship needs one. The pieces that feel most cinematic are often the pieces that cannot bear weight. Later accounts pulled the ship toward other places. Zora became attractive to searchers because later witnesses and later sightings seemed to point there. Emlyn Brown spent years pursuing that logic. In 1999, sonar found a wreck that seemed promising. The dimensions looked right. The location seemed right. The story seemed for a moment ready to end. Then the camera went down. The wreck was not Waratah. It was the Nail Sea Meadow, a cargo ship sunk by a German U-boat in the Second World War, with military hardware on the seabed around her. That false find is one of the most useful modern pieces of the case. Not because it solves Waratah. It does the opposite. It shows how easy it is for a missing ship to recruit evidence after the fact. A sonar outline can look like an answer. A remembered sighting can look like a coordinate. A wreck in the right water can look like the end of a century-long search until the camera shows tanks and trucks. The modern oceanographic work adds another caution. The Agulhas region can produce severe seas where current, wind, and seabed shape interact. Recent scholarship has tried to reconstruct Waratah's route against those conditions and has argued that a rogue wave event near the continental slope is plausible. That work can sharpen the map. It cannot turn the unknown into an eyewitness. The legend says the case is strange because the ship vanished so completely. The records say the harder problem is that almost every explanation asks one weak piece of evidence to carry too much weight. The inquiry's gale theory has the strongest contemporary spine, but it has no wreck. The explosion theory has witness material, but the witness material conflicts. The Zora search had a plausible target, but the target became another ship. The instability argument has repeated testimony and the owner's correspondence, but the calculations do not permit a simple verdict that Waratah was unseaworthy when she left Durban. That is why this episode should not end with a solved sinking. It should end with the shape of the gap. Waratah was not lost because nobody had doubts. The doubts are in the record. She was not lost because the inquiry ignored stability. Stability is the argument the inquiry could not escape, and she was not made safe by the fact that the court found sufficient stability as laden. A ship can pass the arithmetic available to the court and still expose the weakness of the arithmetic when the sea supplies the test. My reading is this. The Waratah disappearance became a legend because no wreck survived to discipline the story. But the inquiry record is not empty. It points to a ship whose tender behavior had been noticed, argued over, minimized, calculated, and finally left unresolved. Waratah's deepest mystery is institutional, not romantic. The court could not prove the ship was unsafe. It also could not make the evidence of tenderness disappear. So it named the weather, preserved the uncertainty, and left the design system standing. That may have been legally cautious. It was not the same as a clean answer. The ship has never been found. The last reliable image remains a large steamer, upright, making speed, passing another vessel on a coast where the weather was rising. The map ends there, the file does not.